John Miller sat alone in his dimly lit kitchen, the faded wallpaper peeling slightly behind the flickering fluorescent light overhead. His hands trembled slightly as he traced the edges of an old photograph, the one where he was young, smiling wide, arms around his son Tim, a model rocket in the background. The scent of cold coffee lingered in the mug nearby, long forgotten. He sighed, a deep, hollow sound that seemed to echo the emptiness he felt inside. At 68, John had grown used to the silence, the endless days blurring together like a slow-moving fog. He often wondered if this quiet was all that remained for him, the days of fading relevance, the creeping loneliness that no television show or call from a distant daughter could quite fill. The thought haunted him, what if everything I believed about getting old was wrong? Was it really true that his best days were behind him? Was it the natural order of things to slow down, to fade away like an old light bulb waiting to burn out? The question clawed at him, urgent and impossible to shake. As the evening news hummed quietly from the cracked TV on the counter, a familiar face caught his attention. Elon Musk was speaking, bold and energetic as always, outlining a vision that seemed to defy gravity itself, plans for rockets, colonizing Mars, the future unfolding with impossible speed. Elon's voice crackled through the speakers, talking about pushing limits, about never accepting no for an answer. Something stirred inside John, something long dormant, a flicker of defiance against the creeping certainty of decline. Could this man, with all his daring and drive, somehow light a fire in someone like him? Could the spark of Elon Musk's mindset be the key to a life that wasn't just about waiting to end? John felt a sudden urge to act, but years of disappointment and doubt held him back. He'd been told to slow down, to accept that he was too old for big dreams now. His daughter Sarah had hung up on him the last time he mentioned learning something new. The doctor had warned him again to take it easy after a recent checkup. Yet here was Elon, shouting across the digital void, daring him to imagine more. For the first time in months, John picked up his phone and typed a search, how to start over at 65. The results were a mix of inspiring stories and cold statistics, but one phrase caught his eye, you're never too old to reinvent yourself. It felt like a message written just for him. His fingers hesitated over the keyboard before typing out a comment on a senior community forum, what's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Before he could second-guess himself, he hit send. A small act, but it cracked open something inside him. Maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the last chapter. Maybe this was the beginning of something new. John glanced back at the photo on the counter. His younger self smiled with so much hope, so much promise. That boy had dreams, dreams he'd buried beneath years of work, regret, and fading confidence. He owed it to that boy to try again. Outside, the wind rustled through the empty streets of the small town where John lived. The night seemed darker, but in his heart, a quiet light began to glow. It wasn't much yet, just a whisper of possibility, but it was enough to make him believe that the moment everything changed might just be unfolding right now. Somewhere, Elon Musk's voice echoed, when something is important enough, you do it even if the odds are not in your favor. For John, the odds were stacked high, but so was the fire rekindling within. This was the moment he decided not to fade quietly into the night. This was the moment he decided to become the spark. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? John Miller's life before that quiet evening in his kitchen was a slow unraveling of the man he used to be. Born and raised in a small Rust Belt town where factories once roared and dreams were built with calloused hands, John was the kind of guy who believed in hard work and simple pleasures. He had spent 40 years as a mechanic, his hands skilled at bringing old engines back to life, his mind wired to solve problems with grit and patience. But over the years, as the factories closed and younger workers left for the coasts, John's world shrank. His marriage with Linda, once a bright chapter filled with shared hopes and laughter, had dissolved quietly under the weight of unspoken regrets and missed chances. They separated 10 years ago, and the house that once echoed with children's laughter now sat silent, save for the occasional creak of settling wood and memories trapped in the wallpaper. His 2 children, Sarah and Tim, both distant and busy with their own lives, rarely called. Their voices on the phone sounded polite but strained, a reminder of the growing chasm between them. John blamed himself sometimes, wondering if his stubbornness or his inability to adapt had driven them away. The nights were the hardest. Sitting alone in the living room, the ticking clock reminding him of each passing second, John felt the weight of invisibility pressing down like a suffocating fog. His body wasn't what it used to be. The aches and stiffness made even simple tasks feel like mountains. His doctor's warnings about slowing down and focusing on quality of life sounded more like a sentence than advice. But inside, John's mind was restless, craving meaning, a chance to prove he still mattered. He had a box of old keepsakes tucked away in the attic, faded photographs, letters, and a few model rockets he'd built with Tim when the boy was young. Those rockets were symbols of a time when hope felt limitless, when a father and son dreamed together under open skies. John often pulled them out during his lonelier moments, tracing the dents and scratches like reading a forgotten story. One memory burned brighter than the rest, a summer afternoon when John and Tim stood in the backyard launching their homemade rockets. The boys' eyes sparkled with wonder as the tiny engines roared and soared into the blue. "We'll build a rocket that can reach the stars, Dad," Tim had said, voice full of promise. John had smiled then, thinking that dreams were the stuff of youth. Now, decades later, he wondered if those dreams had been foolish or if maybe, just maybe, they were still alive beneath the dust of years. John's regret was not just about the dreams left unfinished but the relationships quietly slipping away. Linda had remarried and moved to Florida, and Tim, once so close, now avoided calls like a reminder of old wounds. Sarah lived 3 states away, buried in her career and her own family, with little time for the father who once seemed so strong. Sometimes John felt like a ghost in his own life, watching from the sidelines as everyone else moved forward. The town itself felt like a relic of the past. Main Street was lined with shuttered shops and empty storefronts. The old diner where John used to grab a coffee with friends was now a faded memory, replaced by a "For Lease" sign swinging in the wind. The streets were quieter, the laughter rarer. It was as if the whole world was leaving him behind. Yet in the midst of that stillness, John held on to a stubborn ember of hope. He was not ready to accept that his story was over. He remembered reading about Elon Musk in a magazine years ago, the young entrepreneur who dared to dream big, who pushed boundaries no one else dared touch. Elon's story was unlike anything John had ever seen, a man who built rockets, electric cars, and dreamed of colonizing Mars. It was as if Elon was living in a different world altogether, one full of impossible possibilities. Sometimes John thought about how Elon Musk never seemed to slow down or give up, no matter the obstacles. It felt unfair at first. Why did someone so young get to chase dreams at the speed of light while John felt stuck in the shadows of his own life? But then he realized something: Elon wasn't special because of his age or his fortune. He was special because he refused to accept limits. He broke every rule that said failure was the end, that some dreams were out of reach. And that spark, Elon's refusal to be confined by age, fear, or failure, was exactly what John needed to see. On a particularly cold afternoon, John sat at the kitchen table staring at his laptop, scrolling through an article about Elon's latest project, a spacecraft designed to take humans to Mars. The words hit him differently than before. Age is just a number, Elon had said in an interview. If you're not failing, you're not innovating. If you're not failing, you're not trying hard enough. John closed his eyes, letting those words settle. Maybe it wasn't too late for him. Maybe the man who built rockets was sending a silent message to those like him: you're not done yet. You're just in chapter 2. That evening, John pulled out his dusty toolbox from the back of his closet, the one that hadn't seen daylight in years. He wiped off the thick layer of dust and opened it carefully, revealing old wrenches, screwdrivers, and the small bits and pieces he had collected for years. His hands trembled slightly, but not from weakness. This time, it was anticipation. He had no clear plan, no grand design, but for the first time in years, he felt the stirrings of something new, a restless energy that pushed against the heaviness of age and regret. Maybe he would build something small, something to remind himself that creation was still possible. Maybe, just maybe, he could reclaim the sense of wonder he'd lost. As the evening deepened and the house grew colder, John made a silent promise, to try, to push forward, to challenge the story he'd told himself for so long. The story that he was too old, too tired, too irrelevant. He didn't know where the road would lead, but he was ready to take the first step. Because deep down, he understood that change was possible at any age. Elon Musk had shown him that. And now, John was ready to believe it too. Despite the flicker of hope John felt, his mind was a battleground of doubt and fear. Every morning when he woke up, the question hovered like a thick fog: is it too late? The years of disappointment had taught him to expect the worst, and the voice of caution inside his head was relentless. When he mentioned his new idea to his daughter Sarah during a rare phone call, her tone was brisk and dismissive. "Dad, you need to take it easy. You're not a young man anymore," she said, as if trying to protect him from his own dreams but instead shutting the door on his hope. "Why do you want to start something now? Just enjoy your retirement." The words stung, not because Sarah meant them cruelly, but because they echoed the doubts he'd been wrestling with himself. In his doctor's office last week, after mentioning his intention to work on some projects in the garage, the physician had given him a pointed look. "John, I want you to think about slowing down. You have to prioritize your health now. No more heavy lifting or long hours on your feet." The caution felt like a sentence, a decree that his best days were behind him. At home, the house was quiet except for the soft hum of the television. The news ran a story about Elon Musk's latest Mars mission, showing rocket engines igniting, flames erupting beneath a towering spacecraft. Elon's voice was bold and full of certainty, speaking about pushing boundaries and the importance of daring to fail. John watched, captivated but also challenged. If a man half his age could risk so much to chase impossible dreams, why couldn't he? Yet the voice of reason inside him argued back, warning about the risks of failure, the shame of trying and falling short, the loneliness of walking a path few would understand or support. It was an inner war, the cautious man who had spent decades playing it safe versus the restless dreamer who refused to fade away quietly. John's nights were restless. He lay awake, turning Elon Musk's words over in his mind. When something is important enough, you do it even if the odds are not in your favor. He had always admired Elon's fearlessness, his ability to charge ahead despite setbacks. Could he find that courage in himself? The next morning, John shared his thoughts with his neighbor, Frank, an older man who worked at the local hardware store. Frank listened patiently but shook his head. "John, you don't want to end up chasing shadows. You've got to accept your limits." The skepticism was familiar and painful. It reminded John how society often saw people like him, too old to matter, too slow to keep up. His children's doubts and the doctor's warnings were voices of that same societal script. Yet Elon Musk's presence in his mind was a counterweight, a defiant whisper: break the mold. Defy the odds. To cope with the turmoil, John started listening to Elon's interviews and podcasts during his evening walks. Elon's tales of failure and relentless perseverance became a lifeline. He learned how Musk had faced bankruptcy, public criticism, and countless setbacks but pushed on anyway. The stories inspired John but also stirred anxiety. Could he match that level of drive? Was it foolish to dream so big at his age? The internal conflict deepened when Sarah called again, more firm this time. "Dad, I'm worried about you. You've been talking about all these projects, but you need to focus on your health and your future. We don't want to lose you." John heard the love in her voice but also the fear. It was a crossroads. Give in to the voices urging caution and acceptance or fight for a second chance at purpose. He thought about the photo of him and Tim launching rockets in the backyard, the boy's shining eyes full of possibility. That memory was a beacon in the fog. John realized that his fear was not just about failing but about being invisible. Forgotten by his family, by society, and most painfully, by himself. He wanted to matter again. The inner war raged on for days. Some mornings he felt ready to leap, to open the garage door and start building. Other days, he sank into the worn armchair, overwhelmed by doubt. Yet each time, Elon Musk's words echoed in his mind, if something is important enough, you do it even if the odds are not in your favor. That mantra became his anchor. Slowly, John made peace with the discomfort of uncertainty. He recognized that fear was natural but could not be a cage. The question was no longer, is it too late, but, what will I do with the time I have left? The choice felt both terrifying and exhilarating. John decided to take a small but bold step. Instead of waiting for permission or perfect conditions, he would start by organizing his garage and setting aside a little time each day to work on a project. It was a gesture of defiance and hope, a refusal to be defined by age or circumstance. That evening, as he flicked on the old fluorescent light in the garage and pulled out his dusty toolbox, John felt the weight of years but also a surge of possibility. The inner war was far from over, but the battle line had shifted. He was no longer a passive observer of his own fading story. He was ready to fight for a new chapter. The night deepened around the small house on the quiet street, but inside, a fire burned. Not a roaring blaze, but a steady flame that promised warmth and light in the days ahead. John knew the road would be hard, filled with setbacks and doubts. But as Elon Musk's voice whispered through the static of late-night radio, John made a vow, to push beyond the limits, to embrace failure as part of the journey, and to reclaim the purpose he thought was lost. The moment had come to stop asking, is it too late, and start asking, what if? What if this was only the beginning? John's garage was cluttered with decades of memories, old paint cans, forgotten tools, dusty boxes filled with scraps. The air was thick with the scent of sawdust and rust, a tangible reminder of years past and projects unfinished. On this chilly autumn morning, as the sun cast pale light through the small window, John stood in the middle of the chaos and took a deep breath. He was about to make a choice that, though small in the eyes of the world, felt monumental to him. Inspired by Elon Musk's relentless drive and refusal to accept limits, John decided to build a model rocket, a tribute to the dreams he and Tim once shared. The plan was simple, one small project, something to ignite his sense of purpose without overwhelming him. He cleared a space on the workbench, pulling out the old toolbox he had wiped clean just days before. Every tool felt familiar yet foreign in his hands, as if awakening muscles and memories long dormant. With trembling fingers, he unpacked a kit he had ordered online, designed for beginners but detailed enough to challenge him. The rocket was nothing like Elon's massive spacecraft, but in that small model, John saw a symbol, of starting again, of daring to dream despite the years. Each step required focus and patience. He carefully read the instructions, mixed glue, sanded pieces, and assembled tiny parts. The physical work was harder than he expected, his hands ached, his back stiffened, but with every completed section, a sense of accomplishment blossomed. This was not just a hobby, it was a statement. He was reclaiming himself. The neighbors noticed the change too. Frank stopped by one afternoon, leaning against the doorway with a skeptical smirk. "Building rockets now, huh? You sure you're not biting off more than you can chew?" John smiled but didn't back down. "Maybe. But I'm trying. That's what counts." Even Sarah, despite her worries, sent a tentative text. "Glad to hear you're doing something, Dad. Just don't overdo it, okay?" The cautious encouragement was enough to keep John going without second-guessing himself too much. As days turned into weeks, John developed a routine. Each morning after breakfast, he retreated to the garage, immersing himself in the project. The physical effort rekindled a vitality he hadn't felt in years. The workbench, once a forgotten corner, became a sanctuary. With each piece glued and painted, John's confidence grew. More importantly, his mindset shifted. He started to believe that age was not a barrier but a context, a backdrop against which he could still create, still build, still dream. Elon Musk's example echoed in his mind: risk, fail, learn, repeat. This was not about perfection but about action. The small rocket became a metaphor for John's own journey, fragile but capable of soaring. The hardest part was not the physical labor but the emotional hurdles. Old fears surfaced: the fear of failing in front of his family, the fear of being seen as foolish or irrelevant. But John pushed through, learning to embrace discomfort as a sign of growth. One day, after finishing the final coat of paint, John stood back and looked at his creation. The rocket was simple, modest, but beautiful in its imperfections. It was a testament to resilience and courage. That evening, he set up a small launch in the backyard, just as he had done with Tim all those years ago. The model soared a few feet into the air, trailing a small plume of smoke, before landing softly on the grass. The sight brought tears to John's eyes, tears of joy, relief, and hope. That small victory reignited a fire that had been smoldering for years. News of John's project spread quietly among the neighbors. Some shook their heads, others smiled with surprise. But John no longer sought approval. He was doing this for himself. The act of choosing to change, to begin again, gave him a renewed sense of identity. It was not about the size of the project but the courage to start. John's story began to ripple beyond his immediate circle when he shared photos of the rocket and his progress on a local online forum for seniors. The responses were encouraging, sparking conversations about reinvention and purpose. Inspired by the interaction, John started writing short posts about his experience, about fighting doubts and embracing failure. The words came slowly at first, but with each post, his voice grew stronger, clearer. His story was becoming more than a private struggle, it was turning into a beacon for others who felt stuck or forgotten. The inner transformation was profound. John wasn't just building a rocket. He was building a new version of himself, one who dared to hope, to act, and to connect. The ripple effect was visible even in his family. Tim sent a message out of the blue, curious about the photos. Their conversation was cautious but real. Sarah, too, softened her tone, offering support instead of skepticism. The emotional walls that had separated them for years began to crack. John's bold choice to take one small step forward was proving to be the catalyst for change on many levels. It wasn't a dramatic leap into a new career or a sudden reinvention. It was something quieter but just as powerful: the courage to choose action over inertia, hope over despair. Elon Musk's legacy in John's life was clear: change doesn't need to be seismic to be meaningful. Sometimes, the smallest act of daring can light a path towards something greater. As John packed away his tools each night, he felt a growing peace. The journey ahead was uncertain, but he was no longer afraid. He was ready to embrace the challenges, the failures, and the victories. Because for the first time in a long time, John knew he was not done yet. He was just beginning chapter 2. John's small rocket launch was more than just a personal victory, it was the breakthrough moment that transformed his entire outlook. After the launch, he felt lighter, as if the weight of years had lifted just a little, making room for something new to grow. The sense of accomplishment sparked a wave of confidence he hadn't experienced in decades. Inspired by this breakthrough, John decided to share his journey more openly. He posted photos and reflections on a local community forum, writing honestly about his struggles with aging, loss, and rediscovery. To his surprise, the response was immediate and heartfelt. Comments poured in from other seniors who saw themselves in his story. People who felt invisible, forgotten, and stuck in routines that no longer fulfilled them. Many shared their own dreams postponed or abandoned, expressing gratitude for John's courage to start anew. This sense of connection was a revelation. John realized he was not alone. His small act of courage had tapped into a larger, universal longing, the desire to matter, to be seen, and to keep growing no matter the age. One message stood out from a woman named Gloria, a retired schoolteacher from Ohio, who wrote, "Your story gave me permission to try again. Thank you for showing me that it's never too late." Those words struck a deep chord. John began exchanging messages with Gloria and others, forming a virtual support network that became a lifeline. The isolation that once seemed permanent was giving way to new friendships and shared hope. Meanwhile, the project in his garage evolved. John's initial model rocket became the first of many experiments. He started to tinker with designs, learning from mistakes, celebrating small improvements. The garage, once a place of clutter and memories, had become a workshop of possibility. Physically, John felt stronger. The daily routine of focused work improved his stamina and dexterity. His doctor, once cautious, noticed the positive change and encouraged him to keep moving forward. Emotionally, John felt a renewed sense of purpose. The inner war of doubt was far from over, but each success chipped away at the fear. One afternoon, while listening to an Elon Musk interview on a podcast, John heard Elon say, "Persistence is very important. You should not give up unless you are forced to give up." The words echoed in John's mind like a battle cry. He decided to document his journey more formally, starting a blog called Chapter 2. In his posts, John wrote candidly about the challenges of aging, the struggle to reconnect with family, and the lessons he learned from Elon's fearless mindset. The blog was modest but sincere, and it quickly gained traction among seniors across the country. John's story became a beacon for those who felt left behind, a reminder that life could still surprise and inspire. His vulnerability and honesty created a ripple effect, encouraging others to share their stories and take their own first steps toward change. One morning, as John sat at his kitchen table responding to blog comments, the phone rang. It was Tim. The conversation was awkward at first, filled with long pauses and cautious words. But as they talked, something shifted. Tim expressed curiosity about his father's projects and admitted he'd missed their relationship more than he had realized. They agreed to meet for lunch the following week, a small but significant step toward healing old wounds. John hung up with a mix of hope and nervousness. The breakthrough in his personal life was as powerful as the one in his garage. Weeks later, at the local park where they used to launch model rockets, John and Tim sat side by side, watching a group of kids play. The silence between them was comfortable, a space for new beginnings. John realized that breaking through wasn't about sudden, dramatic change but about persistence, vulnerability, and the willingness to try again. His journey echoed Elon Musk's path, filled with setbacks, doubts, and moments of fear, but powered by an unyielding refusal to quit. John's story was no longer just his own. It was part of a growing movement among seniors reclaiming their stories and rewriting what aging could mean. The blog grew, the community expanded, and John found himself speaking at local events, sharing his message of hope and action. In every story he told, one truth was clear: you're never too old to start again. The evening before his first public talk, John sat alone in his living room, reflecting on how far he'd come. The house, once so quiet and lonely, now felt alive with possibility. The fear and doubt had not disappeared, but they no longer controlled him. He was ready to face the future, not as a man resigned to fading away, but as someone who had broken through the barriers of age and expectation. John's journey was a testament to the power of small steps, courage, and the spark of inspiration that comes from unlikely places. Elon Musk had been that spark, a symbol of daring to dream beyond limits, but John had become his own guide, proving that transformation was possible for anyone willing to fight for it. As he prepared to speak to a room full of seniors the next day, John felt a profound sense of peace. His life was no longer defined by what was lost but by what was yet to come. The chapter 2 he had feared might never arrive was unfolding before him, full of challenges, yes, but also endless possibility. And this time, John was ready. John stood before the crowd at the community center, a room filled with faces weathered by time but bright with curiosity and hope. The smell of coffee mingled with the faint scent of old wood and polished floors. This was his moment, the culmination of months of quiet courage, small victories, and relentless persistence. As he looked out at the audience, many of whom shared the same doubts and fears he had carried, John felt a surge of emotion. He remembered the days when he thought his story was over, that he had nothing left to offer. Yet here he was, sharing his journey, his failures, his triumphs, not as a tale of heroism but as a testament to the power of choosing to begin again. "I thought it was the end," John began, his voice steady but filled with feeling, but it was just the beginning of chapter 2. The room was silent, hanging on his words. He spoke of the years lost to regret and fear, of the loneliness that had crept into his life after his wife passed and his children grew distant. He didn't shy away from the truth, the weight of invisibility, the temptation to give up. But then he shared the spark that changed everything, the moment he saw Elon Musk's words about fearlessness and perseverance. That spark, he explained, was a gift, not from a billionaire entrepreneur, but from a mindset that refused to accept limits imposed by age or circumstance. John described his first hesitant steps in the garage, building that small model rocket, and how each tiny success reignited a fire inside him. He told them about the online community that grew from his blog, the messages from strangers who found hope in his story, and the fragile but real healing of his relationship with his son Tim. "You are not done yet," John said, his eyes scanning the room. "You are not invisible or irrelevant. You have the power to write your own next chapter, to create a legacy that matters, not just to the world, but to yourself." The audience responded with quiet nods, some wiping away tears. For many, John's words shattered the silence that had kept their dreams locked away. The talk ended with a standing ovation, but more importantly, it sparked conversations that lasted long after the lights dimmed. Back at home that evening, John sat in his favorite chair, feeling a profound peace. The journey had transformed not just his own life but the lives of others. He realized legacy wasn't about grand monuments or wealth, it was about the impact of courage, connection, and the choice to keep growing. Reflecting on the past months, John saw how Elon Musk's example had been a catalyst, but the real change came from within. He had been waiting for permission to matter again, and now he knew he was the one to give it to himself. His story was no longer one of fading away but of rising anew. As the days passed, John continued to build, write, and connect. He launched a small initiative to teach seniors in his town how to use technology to share their stories and pursue passions. The ripple effect of his transformation grew, weaving through the community like a lifeline. Friends who had once doubted now sought his advice and inspiration. Even Sarah, who once worried about his ambitions, became an active supporter, proud of her father's resilience. John's new legacy was alive and evolving. The chapter 2 he had feared was the twilight of life was instead a dawn of purpose and possibility. He had discovered that growing older was not a sentence but an invitation to redefine what it meant to matter, to create, to love, and to inspire. In quiet moments, John would sometimes revisit the old photo of him and Tim, rocket in hand, eyes shining with dreams. Now, that image was not a symbol of lost youth but of enduring hope. He was no longer waiting for the world to notice him. He was making his mark on his own terms. "I was never too old," he thought, "I was just waiting for permission to matter again." And with that realization, John embraced his new legacy, a legacy not of past achievements but of ongoing transformation, courage, and the relentless pursuit of what comes next. After the talk at the community center, John felt a new energy coursing through his days. The quiet mornings in the garage shifted into a dynamic rhythm of projects, meetings, and connection. What had started as a simple model rocket had blossomed into a mission to inspire others to see aging not as an end but as an opening to new horizons. John's blog, Chapter 2, had grown into a platform where seniors across the country shared their stories of reinvention, challenge, and triumph. Letters arrived by mail and inbox alike, tales of former teachers returning to art, retired nurses opening small clinics, musicians picking up instruments after decades of silence. Each story echoed the same theme: transformation is possible, no matter the age. One day, as John was setting up for a workshop on digital storytelling for seniors, a woman approached him hesitantly. "Hi, I'm Ruth," she said softly. "I've been reading your blog for months. You gave me courage to start painting again after my husband passed." Ruth's voice trembled with emotion, but there was a spark in her eyes John recognized, the spark of someone rediscovering purpose. Over the weeks, Ruth became a regular at the workshops, her paintings slowly filling a corner of the community center. John marveled at the ripple effect. His journey had become a beacon, but the light was shining on many paths now. Meanwhile, John continued to rebuild his relationship with Tim. Their lunch meetings turned into weekend visits, and John shared stories of his projects and newfound hope. Tim, once distant and skeptical, began to open up about his own struggles, the pressures of work, the loneliness he masked behind sarcasm. Their bond was fragile but healing, proof that transformation was not just personal but relational. John's daily routine also evolved. Mornings in the garage became more experimental. Inspired by Elon Musk's relentless curiosity, John tackled new challenges, building small solar-powered devices, experimenting with simple robotics kits, even starting to learn basic coding on his tablet. Each new skill was a victory over the fear that had once held him back. His physical health improved, not through dramatic exercise but consistent movement and purpose. The doctor's earlier warnings to slow down became distant memories as John's vitality grew. But the greatest change was internal. John's mindset shifted from fear of failure to curiosity about possibility. He embraced mistakes as lessons, setbacks as setups for growth. Elon's famous words, "When something is important enough, you do it even if the odds are not in your favor," became his mantra. The community noticed the change. More seniors joined the workshops, eager to explore their passions and overcome the isolation that aging often brings. John's message was simple yet profound: you are not defined by your past or your age. You are defined by the choices you make today. One evening, as John closed the community center, he paused to look out the window. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the small town that had witnessed so much change, including his own. He felt a deep gratitude for the journey, for the people who had touched his life, and for the opportunity to keep growing. But John also knew the journey was far from over. New challenges awaited, new horizons to explore. The story of Chapter 2 was still being written, and the blank pages ahead were full of promise. As he walked home, John thought about Elon Musk again, the fearless innovator who had sparked his transformation. Elon's relentless pursuit of the impossible had shown John that limits exist only when we accept them. That night, John dreamed of rockets soaring higher than ever before, carrying the hopes of those who dared to believe. When he woke, he was ready to reach even further. The future was wide open, and John was no longer waiting for permission. He was writing his own story, bold, fearless, and full of new horizons. John's work with the community center had taken on a life of its own. The once quiet space was now a hub of energy, filled with seniors exploring digital storytelling, art, and new skills. The ripple effect of his journey was spreading far beyond his own transformation. One morning, John received an unexpected call from a local news station. They wanted to feature his story, highlighting how seniors were redefining what it meant to grow older in America. At first, John hesitated. The thought of being in the spotlight was intimidating. But then he remembered Elon Musk's words about embracing challenges head-on and decided this was another step forward. The interview was nerve-wracking but exhilarating. John shared his story honestly, the regrets, the fear, and the bold choice to start building again. He spoke about how Elon Musk's mindset had inspired him to reject the idea that aging meant giving up. The story aired that evening, and the response was overwhelming. Calls, messages, and emails flooded in from seniors across the country who felt seen and inspired. One letter came from a man named George, who wrote, "At 72, I thought my best years were behind me. Watching your story made me realize I still have a lot to give. Another came from a woman named Denise, who said, "You gave me the courage to reconnect with my estranged daughter after 20 years." The ripple was growing into a wave. John realized that his journey had become part of a larger movement, a collective push against the societal narrative that told seniors to slow down and fade away. Inspired by the outpouring, John began organizing regional meetups for seniors interested in creative reinvention. The events were simple but powerful: storytelling circles, workshops on new technologies, and spaces to share fears and hopes. The community that had started in his garage was expanding rapidly. During one of these meetups, John met Marcus, a retired engineer who had spent years feeling disconnected after losing his wife. Marcus had a brilliant mind but lacked the motivation to pursue his ideas. Encouraged by John's example, Marcus began working on a small project, designing affordable solar heaters for low-income homes. His work, fueled by a renewed sense of purpose, quickly gained attention from local organizations. John was thrilled to see how one person's courage could inspire another to step into their own light. The transformation was not just practical but deeply emotional. Seniors were reclaiming their identities, finding joy in creativity, and healing fractured relationships. John's relationship with Tim also deepened. They started collaborating on community projects, blending John's newfound passions with Tim's tech expertise. The gap that once felt impossible to bridge was closing, replaced by shared purpose and mutual respect. Despite the progress, challenges remained. Some family members and friends still doubted John's new path, questioning if it was just a fleeting hobby or a distraction from the realities of aging. John met these doubts with quiet confidence, knowing that real change was messy and required patience. He kept reminding himself, and anyone who asked, that transformation was a process, not an event. Elon Musk's example was a constant guide. The setbacks, the skepticism, the moments of doubt were all part of the journey towards something greater. One chilly evening, John sat alone in his garage, reflecting on how far he'd come. The projects around him, model rockets, solar devices, robotics kits, were symbols of more than just hobbies. They were symbols of resilience, courage, and the refusal to accept limits. As he looked at the tools on the bench, John smiled. He was no longer the man who felt invisible and defeated. He was a catalyst, part of a community rewriting what it meant to age in America. The ripple effect was unstoppable, fueled by the simple truth that you are never too old to start again. John thought about Elon Musk's relentless drive and the lessons he had learned: to embrace fear, to persist despite odds, and to see failure as a step toward success. Those lessons were no longer abstract ideas but living truths shaping his daily life. The future was still uncertain, but John no longer feared the unknown. Instead, he welcomed it with open arms, ready to continue the ripple, one small act of courage at a time. Even as John's life blossomed with new purpose and connections, shadows from the past lingered, reminding him that transformation was never a straight path. The journey forward was also a journey inward, confronting the fears, regrets, and pain he had long buried beneath hope and determination. One afternoon, as John was organizing his tools in the garage, his phone rang. It was his daughter, Lisa. Their relationship had been strained for years, distant and cautious after disagreements and misunderstandings that neither had fully faced. Lisa's voice was hesitant, carrying a mix of sadness and vulnerability. "Dad, I've been thinking a lot about us lately," she said. "I know I haven't been the daughter you deserved. I want to try to fix things, but I don't know where to start." The call stirred something deep inside John. He felt the familiar ache of past wounds, the silences, the missed birthdays, the words left unsaid. Yet beneath the pain was a fragile hope, the same hope that had carried him through his darkest days. He realized that this was another chapter, another test of his newfound courage. John agreed to meet Lisa, despite the nervous knot tightening in his stomach. When they finally sat together in a quiet cafe, the conversation was awkward but honest. They spoke about the years lost to anger and pride, the misunderstandings that had driven them apart, and the deep longing for connection that still remained. Tears came, as did laughter, small steps toward healing. John shared his journey of transformation, the role Elon Musk's mindset had played in reigniting his spirit, and the power of choosing to begin again. Lisa listened, her eyes softening with understanding. She admitted her own fears of aging and failure, the pressures she faced balancing work and family. Their shared vulnerabilities became a bridge, opening a door that had long been closed. The meeting wasn't a miracle cure, but it was a breakthrough, the first real step toward rebuilding their bond. As John walked home that evening, he reflected on the shadows that had threatened to pull him back into despair. Facing those shadows had been daunting, but necessary. He understood now that transformation wasn't just about external achievements or new projects, it was about confronting the parts of himself that still needed healing. This insight deepened his respect for Elon Musk's own struggles, the failures, the setbacks, the relentless self-examination behind the public success. John realized that courage wasn't the absence of fear or pain but the choice to move forward despite them. Over the following weeks, John and Lisa began regular conversations, slowly knitting together the fabric of their relationship. They shared memories, hopes, and even disagreements, learning to listen without judgment. John found that vulnerability created space for authenticity, a gift he wished he had embraced sooner. The shadows remained, old habits, moments of doubt, lingering regrets, but they no longer controlled the narrative. Instead, they became part of a richer, more complex story of resilience and renewal. At the community center, John introduced a new workshop focused on emotional healing for seniors. The sessions created a safe space for participants to explore grief, loneliness, and fear, feelings often overlooked in conversations about aging. The response was overwhelming. Many shared stories similar to John's, revealing the deep emotional work required to truly transform. John saw firsthand how facing shadows allowed light to enter, how courage was as much about inner healing as outer action. His own experience gave him the empathy and strength to guide others through their journeys. One day, during a session, an elderly woman named Margaret spoke quietly about the loss of her husband and the loneliness that followed. John recognized the pain in her words and shared a bit of his story, the fractured relationships, the moments of despair, and the hope he found in choosing to start again. Margaret's eyes welled with tears, but she smiled, grateful for the connection. That moment crystallized John's purpose, to be a beacon not just of possibility but of compassion and understanding. The ripple effect he had sparked now included healing as well as hope. At home, John continued to write his blog, weaving in stories of struggle and healing alongside tales of innovation and courage. He wanted readers to know that transformation was messy and real, filled with shadows and light. His honesty deepened the community's trust and engagement. One evening, as John sat in his garage workshop, he found himself thinking about legacy once again. This time, it wasn't about achievements or public recognition but about the quiet courage of facing one's own shadows and choosing to move forward anyway. He realized that his new legacy was about truth, embracing the whole self, imperfections and all, and inspiring others to do the same. Elon Musk had been the spark, but the fire was now fueled by John's own light, a light born from vulnerability, resilience, and unwavering hope. As the night deepened, John looked out at the stars, feeling connected to something larger than himself. The shadows of the past were still there, but they no longer defined him. Instead, they were chapters in a story of courage, a story that he and so many others were still writing, every day. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? John's journey had been full of small victories, gradual growth, and deep healing, but the breakthrough he had been waiting for arrived unexpectedly, in a moment that felt both ordinary and extraordinary. It was a late spring afternoon, the sunlight pouring through the tall windows of the community center where he often held workshops. John was preparing for a new class on creative technology for seniors when a knock at the door startled him. Standing there was a young woman with a camera crew, Sarah, a producer from a national television network who had been following the story sparked by the local news coverage. "We want to share your story with a wider audience," she said, her eyes bright with excitement. "There's something powerful about your message. The idea that life after 60 can be a bold, creative new beginning." John felt a mix of surprise and apprehension. He had grown comfortable working quietly within his community, but the thought of stepping onto a national stage was daunting. Yet, the same voice inside him that had urged him to pick up tools and rebuild his life whispered encouragement. This was the moment to break through his fears and fully embrace the role he had unwittingly taken on as a guide and inspiration. Over the next few weeks, the filming process brought new challenges and opportunities. John opened up about his past regrets, his fears about aging, and the spark he found in Elon Musk's relentless pursuit of the impossible. The cameras captured moments in the garage, at workshops, and with family, weaving a narrative of transformation that resonated far beyond his small town. When the episode aired, the response was overwhelming. Messages poured in from across the country. Emails, social media comments, letters, all expressing gratitude, hope, and a renewed belief in possibility. One viewer, a woman named Elaine, wrote, "Your story gave me the courage to start my own community garden at 68. Thank you for showing me it's never too late." Another, a man named Frank, shared, "After losing my job, I thought I was finished. Now I'm volunteering and mentoring young people, and I've never felt more alive." The breakthrough was more than public recognition, it was the undeniable proof that John's message was touching lives in ways he had only dreamed of. This validation strengthened his resolve to keep pushing forward, to keep building the community of seniors who refused to be defined by age or circumstance. John's own life continued to evolve. His relationship with Tim blossomed into a partnership fueled by shared goals and mutual respect. Together, they launched an online platform to connect seniors interested in innovation, creativity, and personal growth. The site offered tutorials, forums, and live events, creating a virtual space where age was not a barrier but a badge of honor. John also deepened his commitment to emotional healing. The workshops at the community center expanded to include mindfulness practices, storytelling circles focused on forgiveness, and sessions addressing grief and loss. These programs became lifelines for many, a reminder that aging was not just about physical change but emotional renewal. Yet, the breakthrough also brought new challenges. The attention attracted skeptics and critics, voices questioning whether seniors could truly change or whether John's story was an exception. John met these doubts with patience and grace, knowing that transformation was a personal journey that couldn't be measured by others' opinions. He focused instead on the faces in his workshops, the emails from grateful participants, and the quiet moments of progress he witnessed every day. One particularly poignant breakthrough came when John received a letter from his estranged son, Tim. In it, Tim expressed his admiration for his father's courage and a desire to reconnect on a deeper level. The letter was raw, honest, and hopeful, a testament to the power of vulnerability and the possibility of healing fractured bonds. This breakthrough in their relationship became a cornerstone of John's new life, symbolizing the profound shifts possible at any age. Reflecting on the whirlwind of change, John often thought back to Elon Musk's philosophy. The relentless drive to challenge limits, to fail and try again, to dream bigger than fear allowed, these lessons had shaped John's path. But more than that, John realized that breakthrough moments were not singular events but ongoing processes, built from countless small acts of courage and faith. Standing once again in his garage, surrounded by projects and memories, John felt a deep gratitude. His story was no longer about fading away but about shining brighter than ever. The breakthrough was not a destination but a doorway, one that invited him, and countless others, to step boldly into Chapter 2 and beyond. John had discovered many truths in his journey, about courage, about reinvention, and about the relentless drive that Elon Musk exemplified. Yet, one lesson began to shine more brightly than the rest: the power of connection. Human connection, he realized, was the unseen force that transformed isolated struggles into shared triumphs. It was connection that wove his story into a larger tapestry, binding him to others who also sought meaning beyond the stereotypes of aging. His workshops had grown from small gatherings to vibrant communities where seniors from all walks of life came together, bringing their stories, their pain, their hopes. The community center buzzed with conversations and laughter, a stark contrast to the silence John had once known. It was in this environment that John began to see how loneliness, often the cruelest companion of aging, could be defeated, not just by activity or purpose, but by genuine relationships. One afternoon, a new participant arrived, a man named Carl, recently widowed and carrying the heavy weight of grief. Carl was quiet at first, hesitant to join group discussions, his eyes distant. John recognized that familiar look of someone retreating into pain. Instead of pushing, John simply shared his own story of loss and healing, the small steps that had brought him back to life. Gradually, Carl opened up, drawn into the circle of trust and empathy. Their conversations became a lifeline, and Carl started contributing to workshops, eventually leading a project on photography that captured the beauty in everyday moments. Seeing Carl's transformation reminded John that connection was more than socializing, it was a lifeline that could pull people from the edge of despair to hope. John also reconnected with old friends, people he had lost touch with during years of isolation. These reunions were awkward but healing, proof that it was never too late to rebuild bonds. He invited some of these friends to the community events, where their presence enriched the growing network. Technology played a crucial role in expanding these connections. John had learned to use social media and video platforms not just for sharing his projects but for fostering dialogue and community across distances. Seniors from different states, backgrounds, and experiences found common ground in their desire to redefine aging. The online forums buzzed with ideas, encouragement, and mutual support. John watched as virtual strangers became friends, collaborators, and sources of strength. The ripple effect was no longer confined to his town, it had become a national movement. However, John knew that connection was fragile. It required effort, vulnerability, and a willingness to face the discomfort of old wounds and new challenges. During one particularly difficult workshop, a heated argument broke out between two participants over differing views on family and forgiveness. The tension threatened to fracture the community John had worked so hard to build. Instead of stepping away, John facilitated a dialogue that allowed both sides to express their pain and fears honestly. The conversation was raw and emotional but ultimately healing. It underscored that connection was not about perfection but about holding space for imperfection and growth. This experience deepened John's understanding of leadership and empathy. He realized that fostering connection was an ongoing commitment, one that required patience, humility, and courage. Inspired by Elon Musk's tenacity, John approached these moments not as failures but as opportunities to strengthen the community's foundation. At home, the connections in John's life flourished as well. His relationship with Tim continued to deepen, marked by openness and shared projects. John also rekindled a friendship with Ruth, the painter he had met early on. Together, they planned an exhibition showcasing seniors' art and stories, a celebration of resilience and creativity. The preparations brought excitement and a sense of accomplishment, further reinforcing the idea that life after 60 was vibrant and full of possibility. John's reflections on connection extended beyond human relationships. He felt a growing bond with the world around him, the changing seasons, the quiet strength of the trees outside his window, the vastness of the night sky. This sense of belonging to something larger infused his days with peace and purpose. One evening, as he sat outside watching the stars, John felt a profound gratitude for the journey that had brought him here. The shadows of loneliness and despair were still present at times, but they no longer held power over him. Instead, they were reminders of how far he had come, and how connection, both human and cosmic, could transform even the darkest moments. John's story had become a testament to the power of reaching out, of building bridges where walls once stood. It was a call to others who felt isolated or forgotten to take that first step toward connection, no matter how small or daunting. He knew that the journey of transformation was not a solitary path but a shared adventure, fueled by empathy, courage, and the simple act of showing up for one another. In this chapter of his life, John embraced the truth that connection was not just a comfort but a catalyst, a force that could awaken dormant dreams, heal old wounds, and spark new beginnings. Inspired by Elon Musk's fearless vision and relentless innovation, John dedicated himself to nurturing this power in himself and others. The legacy he was building was no longer about what he could achieve alone but about the lives he could touch, the hearts he could open, and the communities he could help thrive. The ripple effect of his journey was expanding exponentially, fueled by the undeniable human need to belong, to be seen, and to be loved. And with every connection made, John felt the unmistakable truth settle deeper within him: you are never too old to belong, to matter, and to create a life filled with meaning and joy. John had always believed that purpose was something you found early in life, a career path, a family, a clear mission. But his journey taught him otherwise. Purpose was not fixed or finite, it was something that could be rediscovered, reshaped, and reinvented at any stage. The idea was both freeing and challenging. As John worked with the seniors at the community center and connected with others online, he saw countless examples of people redefining what purpose meant for them. Some pursued long-forgotten passions like painting or writing, others embraced new skills like coding or community organizing. The common thread was a refusal to accept the idea that their best years were behind them. John's own sense of purpose had evolved from rebuilding his garage workshop to leading a movement that inspired and connected others. Yet, he understood that purpose was not about grand gestures but daily acts of meaning, whether it was mentoring a young person, sharing a story, or simply showing up with an open heart. One morning, John received an email from Martha, a retired nurse in a nearby town. She wrote about feeling lost after retirement, unsure how to fill her days with significance. Inspired by John's workshops, Martha had started volunteering at a hospice, finding deep fulfillment in providing comfort and companionship to the dying. Her words moved John deeply: purpose isn't about what I used to do, it's about how I can still make a difference. John shared Martha's story during a community event, sparking a powerful discussion about how purpose could be fluid and deeply personal. Some participants spoke about their struggles with identity after retirement, the fear that without a job or title, they had no value. John challenged these beliefs, urging them to see purpose as a living, breathing force that could adapt and grow. Elon Musk's relentless drive had taught John that purpose often required risk and reinvention. Musk didn't stay confined to one role or success. He leapt from software to rockets to electric cars, driven by curiosity and the desire to push boundaries. John encouraged his community to adopt a similar mindset, to experiment, fail, and keep evolving. One of the most inspiring examples was Helen, a 70-year-old former schoolteacher who had started a podcast interviewing other seniors about their life stories and dreams. Helen's project not only gave her renewed energy but created a platform where voices often overlooked could be heard. John supported Helen by sharing her podcast through his network, proud to witness another ripple of purpose spreading. At home, John found himself reflecting on his own reinvention. His relationship with Tim had shifted from tentative reconciliation to a genuine partnership built on shared goals and mutual respect. Together, they brainstormed new projects: an app to connect seniors with local resources, a documentary about aging and resilience, and workshops that blended technology with emotional healing. These collaborations brought joy and excitement, a reminder that purpose was often found in connection and creativity. John also revisited his early dreams. The ambitions he had set aside in youth due to fear or circumstance. He began writing a memoir, not just about his journey but about the universal struggles and triumphs of aging. The act of writing was cathartic, helping him process pain and hope simultaneously. It was another form of purpose, one that honored his whole self. Despite the progress, John knew the path wasn't without obstacles. Moments of doubt still crept in, questions about his relevance, fears of physical decline, and the persistent societal message that aging was synonymous with slowing down. Yet, each time these shadows appeared, John leaned into the lessons he had learned. He reminded himself that purpose was not about perfection or speed but about persistence and passion. Inspired by Musk's example, he embraced the idea that failure and setbacks were essential parts of growth. One day, during a workshop, a participant named Robert shared a story that resonated deeply. After retiring from a career in finance, Robert had struggled with feelings of emptiness and insignificance. But through community projects and volunteering, he found new meaning, contributing his skills to help nonprofits and mentor young entrepreneurs. Robert's journey echoed John's message: it was never too late to redefine yourself and your purpose. These stories, woven together, created a powerful narrative that John shared widely. They shattered the myth that purpose faded with age and replaced it with a vision of aging as a time of renewal and boundless possibility. John's own reinvention was a testament to this truth. As spring turned to summer, John felt a growing sense of peace and excitement about the future. He no longer saw aging as a period of decline but as a second chapter filled with potential and discovery. Purpose was not something to be found and locked in but a living force to be nurtured and transformed. One evening, as he closed the community center after a lively session, John paused to look around the room. The walls were adorned with paintings, photographs, and quotes, testaments to the creativity and courage of the seniors who had walked through its doors. John smiled, feeling the weight and the lightness of his journey. Elon Musk had been the spark, but the fire was his own, a fire fueled by connection, courage, and the relentless reinvention of purpose. The path ahead was still unknown, but John faced it with open eyes and an open heart, ready to embrace whatever came next. Fear had always been a quiet companion in John's life, whispering doubts and warnings that often kept him from stepping fully into his potential. But now, as he ventured deeper into his reinvention, fear took on a new shape: fear of failure, fear of judgment, and fear that his age made success impossible. The old voice telling him he was too old or past his prime echoed louder some days, threatening to drown out the progress he had made. One chilly autumn morning, John sat alone in his garage workshop, surrounded by tools and half-finished projects. He stared at a complex mechanical prototype he'd been building for weeks, a device designed to help seniors with mobility, something deeply personal and practical. Despite the progress, a nagging thought kept creeping in: what if it doesn't work? What if no one cares? What if I'm fooling myself? These fears were not new, but their weight felt heavier now. The stakes seemed higher. Failure here wasn't just a disappointment, it felt like a confirmation of the ageist narratives he'd been fighting against. But then John remembered a quote from Elon Musk that had become his mantra: failure is an option here. If things are not failing, you are not innovating enough. That phrase ignited a spark inside him, a radical permission to fail, to fall, and to rise again. Inspired by Musk's fearless approach, John decided to lean into fear rather than shy away from it. He invited a group of seniors and local engineers to a fail-forward workshop, a safe space to share projects, setbacks, and lessons learned. The room was filled with nervous energy as participants unveiled their ideas, many admitting they were afraid their efforts would end in failure. But as the session unfolded, something remarkable happened. Instead of judgment, there was laughter, encouragement, and honest conversations about mistakes and resilience. Stories of failed ventures became stories of courage and perseverance. John shared his own fears and the prototype that sometimes felt like an impossible dream. The community responded with ideas, support, and even offers to help refine the design. The atmosphere shifted from one of fear to one of collective strength. This experience reinforced a powerful truth: failure was not an end but a necessary step on the path to innovation and growth. John realized that fear of failure often prevented seniors from even starting, but by embracing failure as a teacher, they could unlock new possibilities. At home, John confronted his fears in more intimate ways. He reached out to old friends he'd lost touch with, risking rejection. He attempted new technologies that initially frustrated him. He opened up to Tim about his insecurities and vulnerabilities. Each act was a small rebellion against fear and self-doubt. One evening, during a family dinner, John shared the story of his prototype and the workshop. His daughter Sarah, who had often been skeptical of his projects, listened attentively. "Dad," she said, "I never realized how much you were risking. not just time or money, but your pride. It takes guts to keep trying, especially when things don't go smoothly. Her words touched John deeply. The approval he had sought from family for years was finally coming, not because of success but because of his courage to face fear head-on. As the months passed, John's prototype moved closer to completion, bolstered by community feedback and collaboration. The failures along the way became milestones of learning. Some setbacks were technical, others logistical, but each was met with renewed determination. The journey was a testament to the power of persistence in the face of fear. John also noticed a shift in his own mindset. The voice of fear no longer controlled him. Instead, he greeted fear as a sign of growth and possibility. He taught this perspective in his workshops, encouraging seniors to reframe their relationship with failure. It's okay to be afraid, he told them, but don't let fear stop you from trying. Every failure brings you closer to your breakthrough. This message resonated deeply with the community, inspiring a culture of experimentation and resilience. Reflecting on his transformation, John realized that facing the fear of failure was not just about personal growth but about challenging societal stereotypes. The pervasive belief that seniors should play it safe, slow down, or give up was rooted in fear. Fear of aging, fear of change, fear of vulnerability. By confronting his own fears publicly, John was dismantling those myths and paving the way for others to do the same. Late one night, as John sat in his workshop, he received an unexpected call from a startup founder who had seen his story online. The founder was launching a senior-focused innovation hub and wanted John to join as an advisor. The invitation felt like validation and a new challenge. John accepted, recognizing that his journey of facing fear had opened doors he never imagined. Looking back, John understood that fear would never disappear entirely. But now, it was a compass rather than a barrier, a signal that he was pushing boundaries and growing. Inspired by Elon Musk's relentless spirit, John embraced failure as a friend and teacher, and in doing so, he had transformed not only his own life but the lives of many seniors who had been held back by their own fears. The journey ahead was uncertain, but John faced it with a steady heart, ready to fail, learn, and rise again. John's journey had taken him through many transformations, but one of the most unexpected and rewarding turns was discovering the power of mentorship. At first, John hadn't thought much about mentoring others. His focus had been on rebuilding himself, finding purpose, overcoming fear, and connecting with his community. But as his network grew, younger generations began reaching out, inspired by his story and eager for guidance. One afternoon, John received an email from Emily, a 28-year-old entrepreneur struggling to launch her sustainable fashion startup. She had watched a video of John speaking at a local event and felt a spark of hope. Emily's message was candid: "I'm overwhelmed, unsure if I can make it. Your story gives me courage. Would you be willing to talk?" John hesitated for a moment. He wasn't sure he had much to offer a young businesswoman facing the fierce pace of modern entrepreneurship. But then he remembered Elon Musk's approach: fearlessness, relentless curiosity, and a willingness to take on impossible challenges. He replied, agreeing to meet Emily for coffee. Their conversation surprised John. Emily was bright, passionate, and filled with ideas, but also weighed down by self-doubt and the pressures of a rapidly changing market. John listened more than he spoke, offering insights from his own life, the importance of resilience, the necessity of embracing failure, and the power of community. He shared stories from his reinvention journey, connecting lessons from his experience to the challenges Emily faced. Their meeting sparked a mentor-mentee relationship that neither expected but both cherished. John found himself energized by Emily's enthusiasm and fresh perspective, while Emily gained a steady presence who believed in her potential. The dynamic was symbiotic. Mentorship was not just about giving but also about learning and growing together. Encouraged by this experience, John began to formalize his role as a mentor. He partnered with local colleges and entrepreneurial programs to offer workshops and one-on-one coaching for young innovators and career changers. These sessions became vibrant forums where generations met, shared, and challenged assumptions about age, experience, and capability. John saw firsthand how seniors possessed wisdom, patience, and insights that technology or youth alone could not provide. The mutual respect between young and old sparked creativity and innovation. One day, Emily invited John to speak at a regional startup conference. Standing on stage, John felt the weight and joy of his journey, from feeling invisible and forgotten to becoming a beacon of inspiration. He spoke not just about success or failure, but about the courage to keep moving forward despite obstacles. His message resonated deeply with the audience, many of whom came up afterward to thank him for reminding them that perseverance and reinvention were lifelong pursuits. John also mentored others closer to his age. Many seniors in his workshops began to see the value of passing on their skills and stories to younger generations. They organized intergenerational projects, teaching digital literacy, storytelling, and crafts, that bridged gaps and built new friendships. John realized mentorship was a powerful legacy, a way to ensure that knowledge and hope flowed forward rather than being lost. At home, John and Tim discussed the unexpected joy mentorship brought to their lives. Tim, inspired by John's example, began volunteering to coach young athletes and entrepreneurs, discovering a new sense of purpose himself. Their relationship deepened, grounded in shared values and mutual support. Reflecting on his role as a mentor, John understood it was more than guidance or advice, it was about presence, belief, and unconditional encouragement. He saw parallels between this and Elon Musk's influence, not as a distant icon but as a catalyst who challenged others to think bigger and bolder. Mentorship was, in many ways, a quiet revolution, a passing of the torch that defied ageist stereotypes and celebrated the power of human connection. John's story spread beyond his community, inspiring others to take up mentorship roles and create networks that transcended generations and backgrounds. This movement rekindled hope and purpose for many who had felt invisible or sidelined. One evening, after a long day of workshops, John sat with Emily reviewing her business plan. They talked about risks, strategy, and dreams. Emily's confidence had grown, but she admitted that the path ahead still felt daunting. John smiled and reminded her of a Musk quote they had discussed: "When something is important enough, you do it even if the odds are not in your favor." This reminder was a call to courage that fueled Emily's resolve. John's mentorship journey became a testament to the truth that no matter your age, you can impact lives and be impacted in return. The gifts of wisdom, encouragement, and hope flowed both ways, enriching every step of the journey. In this chapter of his life, John embraced mentorship as a powerful way to continue growing, contributing, and breaking the boundaries society placed on aging. It was a legacy not just of achievement but of connection, courage, and the relentless belief that everyone, no matter their stage in life, had something valuable to offer. With each person he mentored, John felt the unmistakable truth settle deeper within him: you are never too old to inspire, to teach, and to lead the way for others. The future was not a distant horizon but a shared journey, illuminated by the courage and wisdom of those willing to walk it together. John had never imagined himself as a tech person. Growing up in a small town where rotary phones and handwritten letters were the norm, computers and smartphones felt like alien tools designed for a younger generation. But as he embraced his reinvention journey, John realized technology was no longer optional, it was a bridge to connection, creativity, and purpose. The community center where he volunteered had recently received a grant to start digital literacy classes for seniors, and John eagerly signed up. The first few sessions were intimidating. Words like apps, streaming, and cloud storage swirled around him like a foreign language. His fingers fumbled on the touchscreen as he tried to send an email or join a video call. Frustration threatened to overwhelm the excitement of learning something new. Yet John recalled Elon Musk's fearless approach to new challenges, how Musk plunged into industries where he was a novice and learned by doing, failing, and iterating relentlessly. Inspired, John adopted a similar mindset. Instead of fearing his tech limitations, he embraced the beginner's mindset, allowing himself to stumble and ask questions without shame. Slowly, the pieces began to fit together. He learned to video chat with distant family, stream TED Talks on innovation, and even post updates about his community projects on social media. Each small victory was a spark of empowerment. John wasn't just learning technology, he was reclaiming his voice and expanding his reach. The digital world became a new canvas for his purpose. As John grew more comfortable, he noticed many seniors in his community struggling with similar fears and barriers. They felt overwhelmed or excluded, convinced that technology was designed to leave them behind. John knew firsthand how damaging that mindset could be, so he decided to become a digital ambassador. He organized weekly Tech Tuesdays at the community center, informal sessions where seniors could bring their devices, ask questions, and explore new tools together. The atmosphere was patient, supportive, and often filled with laughter over the occasional autocorrect mishaps or funny video discoveries. These gatherings became more than just classes, they were social lifelines, places where isolation melted away and curiosity blossomed. One day, John invited his daughter Sarah to join a session. Sarah, a software developer, was thrilled to help bridge the gap between generations. She introduced simple apps for photo sharing and video messaging, helping seniors connect with family members far away. Watching the joyful reactions reminded John of the deep power technology had to create belonging. Inspired, John expanded the Tech Tuesdays program to include lessons on online safety, creative digital projects, and even basic coding workshops for curious seniors. The initiative caught the attention of local media, which highlighted the community's efforts to break down age-related digital barriers. John's story became a beacon for others feeling lost in the fast-moving tech world. At home, John's engagement with technology opened new doors in his relationship with Tim. They started video calling Tim's grandchildren regularly, sharing stories and smiles despite the miles between them. John also began documenting his reinvention journey through video diaries, raw, unfiltered reflections that he shared online. This vulnerability connected him with a growing audience of seniors and younger people alike, creating a community bound by shared challenges and triumphs. The digital space became a powerful tool for storytelling, advocacy, and connection. Yet John never lost sight of the human element behind the screens. He emphasized that technology was a tool to enhance real-life relationships and purpose, not a replacement for them. The true power lay in using tech to amplify voices, build communities, and spark action. Elon Musk's ventures into space, electric cars, and artificial intelligence demonstrated the limitless possibilities of technology when driven by vision and courage. John adopted that ethos, encouraging seniors to see technology not as a barrier but as a gateway to new frontiers. One afternoon, during a Tech Tuesday session, a participant named Gloria shared how she had used video calls to reconnect with an old friend across the country. Tears of joy streamed down her face as she described the renewed friendship and the healing it brought. Moments like these reminded John why the technology bridge was so vital. It was not about gadgets or screens but about human connection, healing, and hope. John's embrace of technology also fueled new projects. With help from Sarah and local volunteers, he launched an online platform for seniors to share their stories, skills, and resources, a digital village designed to combat loneliness and empower engagement. The platform featured forums, virtual workshops, and a marketplace for handcrafted goods made by seniors. The response was overwhelming, with hundreds joining from across the country, eager to connect and contribute. John watched this digital community grow with pride and humility. It was a testament to the resilience and adaptability of seniors who refused to be defined by outdated stereotypes. They were learners, creators, leaders, living proof that age was no barrier to innovation. As John reflected on his journey bridging technology and aging, he saw how far he had come, from fearful novice to empowered advocate. He knew the road ahead held challenges, but he faced them with confidence rooted in experience, curiosity, and the example of trailblazers like Elon Musk. The future was not a tech divide but a shared journey across new landscapes. In embracing technology, John had found not only tools but a renewed sense of belonging, purpose, and possibility. The bridge was built, and it was wide open for anyone willing to cross. John had spent many years isolated in his own world, burdened by regrets and the silence that often comes with aging alone. Family dinners had become awkward or rare, and old friendships felt like distant memories faded by time and circumstance. But as he transformed, he recognized that rekindling relationships was a vital part of reclaiming his life's meaning. One crisp winter morning, John sat in his small living room scrolling through old photographs on his phone, images of laughter-filled holidays, road trips, and simple afternoons with loved ones. A wave of longing and sorrow washed over him. He realized how many connections had frayed, especially with his eldest daughter Sarah, whose busy life in the city left little room for regular contact. The thought of reaching out scared him. What if she had moved on, uninterested or resentful? What if the years of silence were too much to overcome? But then John recalled something Elon Musk once said: "Some people don't like change, but you need to embrace change if the alternative is disaster." John saw his estranged relationships as part of that change, an opportunity for renewal rather than a disaster to avoid. He decided to take the first step. He wrote Sarah a heartfelt email, acknowledging past mistakes, expressing love, and sharing a glimpse of the man he was becoming. Sending it felt like stepping off a cliff, but the response came quicker than he expected. Sarah's reply was cautious but open, inviting a phone call. That call was tentative at first, filled with pauses and awkwardness, but it quickly warmed into laughter, shared memories, and a mutual desire to rebuild. This fragile reconnection sparked hope. Encouraged, John reached out to other family members and old friends he had lost touch with over the years. Some conversations were harder than others, stirred by old wounds or misunderstandings, but many blossomed into new dialogues filled with honesty and forgiveness. John learned that vulnerability was not a sign of weakness but a bridge to deeper connection. At the community center, John shared his journey of mending relationships during a storytelling night. Seniors gathered around, many nodding in recognition of similar struggles: estrangement, loss, and the fear of reaching out. John's openness inspired others to take their own steps toward reconciliation. Soon, the group organized Reconnect events, casual gatherings where people could invite estranged loved ones, share meals, and rebuild bonds in a safe, supportive space. These events became emotional and transformative, with tears, laughter, and moments of profound healing. John also focused on his relationship with Tim. Years of routine had dulled their connection, but now, with renewed purpose, they found themselves talking more deeply, about fears, hopes, and the meaning of companionship. They revisited old places from their early days, sparking memories that rekindled affection and understanding. John realized that relationships, like gardens, required care, patience, and sometimes a brave pruning to grow anew. Rebuilding bonds wasn't about erasing the past but embracing it with compassion and grace. Technology played a surprising role in these reconnections. Video calls, shared photo albums, and group chats kept conversations alive across distances and busy schedules. John taught others in his community to use these tools to maintain their own bridges to family and friends. One evening, as John and Sarah shared a virtual dinner, Sarah expressed gratitude for her father's courage to reach out. "You've shown me that it's never too late to heal, Dad. You're teaching me more about strength and love than I ever realized." Her words moved John deeply, affirming the power of connection and second chances. John's story spread beyond his immediate circle, encouraging many seniors to confront the fears and pride that often kept them isolated. He emphasized that no relationship was beyond repair and that the first step, however small, was the bravest and most important. The journey was not always easy. Some relationships remained complicated, some wounds slow to heal. But John learned that persistence, humility, and forgiveness were keys to creating new chapters. Reflecting on his journey, John understood that rekindling relationships was a form of reinvention itself, a reclaiming of love and community that defied the loneliness so often associated with aging. This transformation was a living testament to the idea that you are never too old to change, to forgive, and to love again. Inspired by Elon Musk's example of taking bold risks and defying expectations, John embraced this emotional frontier with courage and hope. He realized that the legacy he wanted to leave was not just about projects or achievements but about the lives touched and the hearts mended along the way. As John looked around at the faces of friends and family gathered at a recent reunion, laughter and warmth filling the room, he whispered to himself, "I was never too old to matter. I was just waiting to matter again." John had come to understand that purpose was the engine driving his transformation, the reason why each day mattered beyond the routine of existence. After years of feeling sidelined by aging, purpose became his compass, guiding him through uncertainty and pain toward fulfillment and joy. Early on, John struggled to define what purpose meant for someone in their 60s and beyond. Was it simply staying busy, or was there something deeper, more lasting? His answer came gradually, shaped by his experiences mentoring younger entrepreneurs, rekindling family ties, and embracing technology to connect communities. Purpose, John realized, was about contribution, using your unique gifts and story to make a difference, however small or grand. It was about waking up with a reason to engage fully, to feel connected to something bigger than oneself. He remembered Elon Musk's relentless pursuit of audacious goals. Transforming energy, space travel, and transportation not for fame but to change the course of humanity. That kind of purpose was radical and inspiring. John didn't have to build rockets or electric cars, but he could harness the same spirit of innovation and courage in his own life. One morning, John stood in a community garden he helped cultivate, surrounded by rows of vibrant vegetables and flowers. The garden was more than a project, it was a symbol of growth, resilience, and community. Volunteers of all ages gathered there, sharing stories and sweat, bridging generations and backgrounds. John's heart swelled with pride and hope. This garden was a living metaphor for purpose, rooted in the soil of dedication and watered by connection. It was tangible proof that even in later life, you could plant seeds that flourish and nurture others. Inspired, John began to speak openly about the power of purpose in workshops and gatherings. He encouraged seniors to discover or rediscover passions, be it art, advocacy, teaching, or volunteering, and to see their contributions as vital to society's fabric. Many in the audience, once hesitant or resigned, found new energy and direction. One woman, Margaret, shared how volunteering at a local school rekindled her love for storytelling and gave her days fresh meaning. Another man, Carlos, started a neighborhood cleanup initiative, bringing neighbors together and restoring pride in their streets. John saw how purpose ignited sparks that kindled communities. At home, purpose reshaped his daily rhythms. He woke early, eager to work in the garden or prepare for his mentoring sessions. Each task, no matter how small, felt connected to a larger mission. Even mundane moments, making coffee, walking Tim's dog, calling a friend, became acts of presence and intention. John's renewed purpose also helped him confront fear and uncertainty. He remembered the nights filled with doubt, wondering if change was possible, if he was too old, too slow, too forgotten. Purpose acted like a beacon, cutting through the fog of worry with clarity and resolve. He faced new challenges with the mindset Musk exemplified, viewing setbacks as opportunities to learn, grow, and adapt. This mindset was contagious, inspiring those around him to embrace their own potential. One afternoon, John organized a community forum titled, Purpose After 60, inviting speakers from diverse backgrounds to share how they found meaning later in life. The event drew a packed house, with seniors, families, and local leaders eager to listen and contribute. Stories ranged from starting second careers to creative pursuits and social activism. The atmosphere was electric with possibility. John's closing remarks echoed a truth he lived daily: purpose is not reserved for the young or the privileged. It's a fire waiting to be lit inside each of us, no matter our age or past. When we find it, we become unstoppable. The forum sparked new initiatives, volunteer groups, creative clubs, and advocacy campaigns that enriched the community and empowered individuals. John's role as a catalyst and participant underscored the power of collective purpose. Reflecting on his journey, John realized purpose was deeply personal yet profoundly social. It connected the individual's quest for meaning with the shared human need for belonging and impact. Purpose healed wounds, fueled resilience, and sparked joy. It transformed fear into action and isolation into community. In quiet moments, John thought about the future. He knew aging would continue to bring challenges, but he no longer feared them. Purpose gave him strength to face whatever came next. He imagined his legacy, not in trophies or accolades, but in lives touched, relationships mended, and the gardens grown, literal and metaphorical. Elon Musk's example of dreaming big and acting boldly had lit the way, but John's purpose was rooted in simple truths: love, courage, and the refusal to be sidelined by age. As John tended the garden one evening, the sun dipping below the horizon, he whispered a vow to himself: to live fully, to give generously, and to inspire endlessly. Because purpose, he knew, was the greatest gift we could give ourselves, and each other. John's transformation was never a straight path. Along the way, he encountered failure, doubt, and fear, the uninvited companions that often accompany change, especially later in life. But rather than allowing these feelings to paralyze him, John learned to embrace them as essential parts of growth, a lesson he drew from watching Elon Musk's bold ventures. Musk's story was filled with setbacks, rockets that exploded, companies on the brink of bankruptcy, critics who doubted his vision. Yet his willingness to fail, learn, and try again made him a symbol of fearless innovation. John realized that fear and failure were not signs of weakness but signals that he was pushing beyond comfort zones, expanding his horizons. This shift in mindset was revolutionary for someone his age, raised in a generation where mistakes were often hidden or feared. When John first decided to start his blog sharing his reinvention journey, he was terrified. What if no one read it? What if people judged him? What if he exposed too much of his vulnerability? The first post was rough, awkward sentences, uncertain tone, but he published it anyway. To his surprise, responses trickled in, some encouraging, some critical, but all valuable. Each comment helped him refine his voice and purpose. Failures followed. A planned community event fizzled due to poor turnout, a grant application was rejected, a video diary was awkward and unpolished. Each disappointment stung, but John remembered Musk's resilience. Instead of retreating, he asked, "What can I learn? How can I improve?" This curiosity transformed setbacks into stepping stones. Fear still visited, fear of health decline, loneliness, being forgotten, but John refused to let it rule him. He practiced mindfulness, deep breathing, and journaling to acknowledge and manage these emotions without becoming overwhelmed. He also shared his fears openly with trusted friends and family, discovering that vulnerability bred connection rather than judgment. John began speaking about failure and fear in his workshops, challenging the stigma that often silenced seniors. He encouraged participants to see mistakes as valuable feedback, fear as a compass pointing to growth areas. These conversations sparked a cultural shift in his community, replacing shame with courage and curiosity. One day, John invited a guest speaker, a local entrepreneur who launched a successful business after retiring at 70, to share stories of late-life risk-taking. The audience was captivated by tales of failures turned into breakthroughs. John felt a deep kinship with these stories, understanding that the path to reinvention was paved with stumbles. Embracing failure also opened John to experimentation. He tried new hobbies, a pottery class, public speaking, and even basic coding, knowing that mastery wasn't the goal but the joy of learning was. Each failure in these activities became a moment of play and discovery, freeing him from perfectionism. This playful approach invigorated his spirit and inspired others to try things they'd long dismissed as too hard or too late. John's relationship with Tim deepened through shared vulnerability. They confessed fears about aging and mortality, supporting each other through moments of despair and hope. This emotional honesty strengthened their bond, reminding John that facing fears together was more powerful than facing them alone. One evening, after a particularly challenging day when a health scare left John anxious, he found solace in a quote from Musk: "When something is important enough, you do it even if the odds are not in your favor." This reminded him that the importance of his journey, to live fully and authentically, outweighed the uncertainties. John's story of embracing failure and fear began to ripple outward, encouraging seniors beyond his immediate community. He received letters from people sharing their own struggles and triumphs, grateful for a narrative that normalized imperfection and resilience. Reflecting on this chapter of his life, John understood that failure and fear were not obstacles but teachers, messengers guiding him toward growth, empathy, and deeper courage. In embracing them, he discovered freedom from self-judgment, freedom to try again, freedom to become who he was meant to be. John's journey was far from over, but with fear and failure as allies rather than enemies, he felt ready to face whatever came next with open arms and a brave heart. John sat quietly in his favorite armchair, the late afternoon sun filtering through the lace curtains and casting warm patterns on the worn wooden floor. The garden outside bloomed with vibrant colors, each flower a testament to seasons past and the careful tending of countless hands. It was a fitting metaphor for the legacy John was beginning to understand he was building, not in monuments or money, but in light. For years, John had wrestled with what legacy truly meant. Was it the inheritance passed down? The accolades earned? The memories held in photographs? Now, after his transformation inspired by Elon Musk's fearless mindset, John saw legacy as something far more dynamic and powerful. Legacy was the light you left behind, sparked by courage, kindness, and the refusal to surrender to invisibility. It was the ripple effect of your actions on the lives of others, stretching beyond your own time and space. John thought back to his earlier days of isolation and regret, the moments when he felt invisible and irrelevant. The shift came not from external validation but from an internal awakening, the realization that his story, his struggles, and his victories could inspire others to find their own light. This legacy was not about perfection but authenticity. As John prepared to give a talk at the local library, titled "Lighting Your Legacy," he reflected on how far he'd come. He planned to share the lessons learned. The power of purpose, the courage to embrace failure, the importance of rekindling relationships, and the necessity of connection in an increasingly digital world. John wanted every listener, especially seniors who felt lost or left behind, to know they had a vital role to play in the tapestry of life. During the talk, John recounted his journey in vivid detail. He described the dark nights of loneliness, the tentative steps toward reconciliation, and the small victories that kindled hope. He shared how Elon Musk's example had challenged his assumptions about aging and possibility, encouraging him to dream boldly and act courageously. The room was packed with a diverse crowd, older adults, family members, and local leaders, each drawn by the promise of hope and empowerment. As John spoke, he saw nods of recognition and tears glistening in eyes. His words sparked conversations about the value of every stage of life and the importance of contributing one's unique gifts. After the talk, many approached John to share their stories and gratitude. A woman named Evelyn told him how his journey inspired her to start writing memoirs she had long shelved. A man named Peter described how he planned to mentor young people in his community. These moments of connection underscored that legacy was alive and growing, fueled by shared purpose. John also reflected on the legacy he was building with Tim. Their renewed relationship, marked by openness and love, was a living testament to the power of forgiveness and commitment. Together, they planned to volunteer at a local hospice, offering companionship to those nearing the end of life, a gift that honored the cycle of existence and the enduring human spirit. Technology remained a vital part of John's legacy work. He continued to expand the online platform connecting seniors across the country, creating spaces for storytelling, learning, and collaboration. This digital village was a beacon of inclusion and empowerment, breaking down barriers and fostering intergenerational dialogue. John felt profound gratitude for the tools that allowed his light to reach far beyond his physical community. Late one evening, John found himself journaling about legacy. He wrote, "Legacy is not a finish line but a journey, a series of moments where we choose to shine despite doubt and fear. It is the courage to matter, the grace to forgive, and the love to connect. We are all authors of our legacy, no matter our age or past." These words capture the essence of his transformation and the message he wished to pass on. John knew there would be challenges ahead. Aging was unpredictable and often unforgiving, but he faced the future with peace and purpose. He understood that legacy was not something to chase but something to live, moment by moment, through choices that honor our deepest values. As the sun set, casting a golden glow over the garden, John looked out with a heart full of hope. He whispered to himself, "I was never too old to leave a light. I am just beginning to shine." John stood on the porch of his small home, the evening air crisp and filled with the scent of pine and earth. The world around him felt alive and full of possibility, a stark contrast to the man who once viewed aging as a slow fading into obscurity. Today, John knew the truth Elon Musk had unwittingly taught him, that life was not a closed book after 60. It was merely the start of chapter 2, a chance to write new stories with the wisdom and courage earned from the past. It hadn't been easy. The path had twists and turns, moments of doubt, and painful confrontations with loneliness and fear. But each step had led to a profound transformation, reshaping how John saw himself and his place in the world. He no longer feared the years ahead but embraced them with a sense of purpose and joy. Reflecting on his journey, John remembered the moment it all changed, the spark ignited by a single Elon Musk quote about defying limits, about pushing through when everyone else said it was too late. That spark had set a fire in his heart, driving him to confront his regrets, reconnect with family, and find meaning beyond the expectations society placed on seniors. John's life was now rich with relationships, passions, and contributions that transcended his age. His community garden thrived as a gathering place for neighbors of all generations, his blog inspired thousands, and his digital platform connected seniors across the country in ways he had never imagined possible. More importantly, John had rediscovered himself, not the man defined by past failures or fears but a resilient, hopeful soul who knew he still had much to give. As John prepared for his morning walk, Tim joined him, their hands clasped tightly, a symbol of the journey they had traveled together. Tim's steady presence reminded John that no transformation was solitary. Love and connection were the heartbeats of every new beginning. During their walk through the neighborhood, John greeted familiar faces and exchanged smiles, feeling the warmth of belonging. He saw seniors participating in local events, young people volunteering alongside elders, and a community revitalized by shared purpose. This vibrant tapestry was a living legacy of the courage to change. John often thought about the message he wanted to leave behind, that you are never too old to reinvent yourself, to heal, to dream, and to lead. Age was not a limitation but a new canvas, rich with possibility. The fear and invisibility he once felt had been replaced by light and influence. One afternoon, John sat with Sarah and her children, the sound of laughter filling the room. Their bond, once fragile and distant, had blossomed into a source of strength and joy. He saw in their eyes the same spark that had propelled him forward, a reminder that change could ripple through generations. John also kept in touch with the many friends he had met through his journey, their stories intertwined like threads in a vibrant quilt. Each person's courage and growth inspired him as much as he inspired them. Together, they formed a community of pioneers redefining what aging could mean. On a quiet evening, John revisited his journal, reading through entries that chronicled his fears, hopes, failures, and victories. He marveled at the distance traveled, from a man paralyzed by regret to one fueled by passion and resilience. He penned a final reflection, "I was never too old to change. I was simply waiting for permission to matter again. Now, I give myself that permission every day." John understood that the end of one chapter was the beginning of another, not just for himself but for all who dared to believe in second chances. His story was a beacon, a call to seniors everywhere to rise, to challenge stereotypes, and to embrace their full humanity. Inspired by Elon Musk's vision of pushing boundaries and reimagining the future, John had rewritten his own narrative, proving that the greatest adventures often begin when we least expect them. As twilight settled, John looked out over his garden, the stars emerging one by one in the deepening sky. He felt a profound peace and excitement for what was yet to come. Life was not done with him, and he was far from done with life. He whispered softly to the night, "This is just chapter 2. The best is yet to come." Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?